Whatever happened between us, tonight let it stay on this street, and nowhere else. That wasn't what I planned to think on moving day. I wanted to count boxes, not breaths, but the sentence kept circling my head like a moth to the porch light, drawn to a glow I shouldn't touch. We arrived just before sunset, the sky rinsed with that thin, peach-colored light that flatters even tired walls. My husband carried the heavier boxes without speaking, jaw fixed the way I had first mistaken for strength and now recognized as habit. Inside the house, a small life came in cardboard cups wrapped in newspaper, a bent umbrella, my mother's chipped porcelain bowl. The floor groaned softly under every step, as if warning us that even new beginnings come with a weight. He set the last box down. "I'll assemble the bed," he said, already turning away. "Okay," I answered, then, lighter. "Maybe we should walk the street after?" "Meet someone?" He shrugged. "We're exhausted." It closed the conversation like a door. When the doorbell rang, I startled, because bells in a new house sound like their own species. I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened it. He stood there in a navy sweater and worn jeans, a bottle of red wine cradled in one forearm, a stack of paper plates in the other, as if he'd come bearing both welcome and solution. Mid-50s, silver at the temples, laughs already stored around the eyes. The kind of man who reads a room the way some people read weather. "Welcome to the block," he said. "I'm the guy next door. Call me the neighbor for now, I'll earn the rest later." He gave the bottle a small swing. "Pop in your fridge for 20 minutes and it'll forgive the car ride." I smiled despite myself. "Thank you, that's very neighborly." "Neighborly is my only marketable skill," he said, tilting his head. "We're throwing a small welcome thing out back: steaks, salad, a suspicious potato casserole that wins hearts despite logic. No pressure, but pressure." I looked over my shoulder. In the hallway, my husband was kneeling, unfolding a hex key, like a surgeon unwrapping an instrument. I cleared my throat. "We let me ask?" "Of course." He stepped back a fraction, enough to make the threshold feel like a neutral country. "I'll be in the yard. You can find it by following the smell of bravado and lighter fluid." He left a little draft of cold air, and something aftershave citrus in the doorway. I carried the bottle to the kitchen, nestled it between milk and a half-melted bag of ice from the move. "The neighbor invited us," I said, "a little welcome party." My husband didn't look up. "You go, I have this, we could both." "It's fine," he said, "I'm not good at that kind of thing." He slid a metal rail into place, face unreadable. On another day I might have insisted. On another version of me, I would have. Tonight I swallowed the familiar answer "I keep for us," and changed into a sweater that made me look less like a moving box. In the mirror by the door, I practiced a neutral smile, the one that promises nothing and apologizes for everything. The backyard next door glowed with string lights and the low sizzle of meat. People were gathered in small commas of conversation. He saw me at once, noticing felt like something he could do from 2 rooms away, and lifted the tongs in greeting. "You made it," he said, as if it were a joint success. "Plate or glass first?" "Glass," I said, then, quickly, meaning water. "Brave in a land of Merlot," he teased, and without looking, reached behind him to the cooler, found a bottle, cracked the top, and handed it over. It was a simple trick, but somehow it felt like a kindness practiced to fluency. He introduced me around with names. I forgot immediately. The couple who ran at dawn, the teacher who swore the school year was longer than calendar science suggested, a retired nurse with a laugh that carried. When he said my name, he did so gently, as if placing it on the table for everyone to share but not smudge. "How's the new house breathing?" he asked when the small talk splintered and regrouped. "Like a stranger in our clothes," I said, surprised at my own answer. "That's honest," he said. "Give it a week. It will start borrowing your shampoo." He touched the grill and it answered him in a flare, and for a moment, the light climbed his face, revealing something tired at the edges, a map of long days I didn't want to read too closely. He saw me seeing it and threw his grin like a soft blanket over the moment. "First American barbecue?" he asked. "First on this street. Then we do a proper tour." He walked me to the fence line, to the lemon tree a previous owner had planted and half forgotten, to the crooked stepping stones that made a path by insisting. He stayed at a polite distance, a step more careful than casual, as if he were translating himself one sentence at a time. When he leaned in to show me a bird's nest in the eaves, his shoulder nearly brushed mine. I didn't move. The space between us felt like a word waiting to be chosen. "You'll hear sprinklers at 4 a.m., he said softly. "The street keeps its own time. Don't be afraid if it feels like rain that forgot how to fall." "I'll remember," I said, and my voice came out lower than I meant. "Do you miss home?" he asked. "Yes," I said, then, truth brushing my throat, "and not the parts you'd expect." He nodded, like he knew the shape of that sentence, even if he didn't know the language. We returned to the table. He placed a steak on my plate with a flourish. He made fun as soon as he did it. "Apologies for medium accidental," he said. "We accept returns only in the form of compliments." I laughed, and it surprised me. My laughter had been packed so carefully for so long that I'd forgotten its shape. He looked pleased with himself, as if he'd tugged a kite string, and found a color in the sky. Later, under the strings of light, someone put music on low, the kind that sounds like weekend mornings and freshly sliced oranges. He leaned an elbow on the table near me, not touching, close enough to warm the air. The tiny hairs at my wrist lifted, traitors telling on me. "You're allowed to breathe here," he said, not looking at me when he said it. "No one grades you for it." "I've been graded for worse," I said lightly. "I can tell," he said, then fixed the sentence with a crooked smile. "Forgive the neighborhood's habit of intimacy. We mistake friendliness for fluency." "Is that what this is? This?" He watched the grill, the small, attentive frown of a man pretending to care too much about heat. "This is me trying not to be rude on your first night." Across the fence, my house sat in the dark like a question. I imagined my husband tightening the last screw, lying down on the newly assembled bed, the ceiling a blank country. Guilt rose and settled, a bird that refuses to be shooed. The retired nurse asked me about the best Korean soups for winter survival. I described flavors and steam, and when I stumbled for a word, he offered one, not perfect, but close, and I accepted it because something about the effort made me want to. When the party thinned and the air cooled, he handed me my jacket from the back of a chair without asking whose it was. His fingers brushed the cuff before letting go. It could have been nothing. It could have been a page turning. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For making the first night feel less like a test." He studied my face the way you study a distant window, to see if there's a light inside. "I was aiming for that," he said softly. "If I overshot, tell me." I should have stepped away then. Instead I stayed inside the circle of warmth. He carried a not quite embrace made of distance. On the porch, he tilted his head toward my house. "Do you want me to walk you to your door?" he asked. "We've had raccoons auditioning for villain roles." "I think I can outrun a raccoon," I said, and he smiled as if imagining it. We crossed the short grass between yards, the dew sneaking up through the soles of my shoes. At the property line he slowed. The string light's last bulb hummed above us. My porch light had burned out, and the dark felt closer than it should. "Here," he said, and raised his phone, the screen a square of daylight. The path lit up, our shadows leaned together, taller than we were. At my door, I fumbled with the new keys. He didn't reach to help. He didn't look away either. The lock turned with a small metal sigh. Behind the door lay boxes and the echo of our earlier silence. He lowered the phone, and for a brief second, the briefest, we were close enough that I could count the flecks in his eyes. There was nothing urgent in his face, only a waiting, the kind that invites a choice without asking for it. "Welcome home," he said. The words settled between us. I should have stepped inside and closed the night softly behind me. Instead, I paused, breathing in the citrus of his aftershave, and the cooler's last whisper of ice. About tonight, he added, voice low, shaped for two. Let's keep the street as generous as it is small. I nodded, and the porch accepted my answer with a creak. The moment held, delicate as glass yet warmed by a living hand. Then the neighbor smiled, the kind that hides a tremor, and stepped back into the pool of light, leaving me at my threshold with the sound of my own pulse, and the outline of a line I had not yet crossed, but had already approached. The music drifted softer as the night thickened, like the party itself had drawn closer, pulled into the smaller circle of those who remained. Plates emptied, glasses refilled, and stories traded in voices lowered, not from secrecy but from comfort. I stayed near the edge of the table, half part of the conversation, half floating above it. Across the fence, I knew my husband was probably asleep already, the bed assembled, the lamp unlit. The thought made me oddly weightless, as if I were untethered for a moment suspended between two houses, two versions of myself. The neighbor sat across from me, shoulders turned toward the group, but eyes slipping back, landing where mine tried not to wait. He didn't stare. He simply returned often enough that I couldn't pretend it was coincidence. You okay? He asked at one point, voice low, timed for the moment, when no one else was listening. Yes. Just new place, new air. Air here takes some getting used to, he said. It's too honest, no perfume, just grass and grill smoke. I smiled faintly. That sounds almost like a warning. Only if you're hiding something. His words lingered, not because they accused, but because they grazed the edges of what I hadn't yet dared name. Someone asked me about Korea, about winters there, about food. I answered politely, drawing small pictures with words, and each time I stumbled over a phrase, the neighbor slid in a suggestion, rough, but close enough to rescue me. The table laughed, clinked glasses, and I thought, this is how warmth is built, in these small rescues, these timed kindnesses. Later, he rose to fetch more coals. I followed without thinking, carrying empty plates. Behind the garage, the voices of the others dimmed to a blur. The night pressed in, cooler now, a thin breeze lifting the edge of my sweater. He crouched by the metal bin, tipping the bag of charcoal, dark pieces tumbling with a hush like broken porcelain. You didn't have to follow, he said. I know, but I felt impolite, just sitting. You're the only guest who offered. That makes you dangerous. Dangerous? I tried to laugh, but it caught in my throat. He looked up, eyes reflecting the faint orange glow from the grill, the kind who makes a man think twice about what he's doing, or not doing. I lowered the plates onto the lid, pulse fluttering faster than it should. I'm just trying to help. Exactly, he said softly. That's the dangerous part. A silence stretched, thin but taut, until the sound of laughter from the backyard snapped it. He smiled quickly, breaking the tension, and brushed his hands off. Come on, before they burn the casserole. We returned, but something had shifted. The table was the same, the music, the same, yet every glance now felt heavier, each pause in conversation filled with more than words. When someone suggested a toast to new beginnings, glasses lifted, and his met mine first. The faintest tap of glass on glass, an unspoken agreement. I sipped, but the taste on my tongue was not wine, it was the nearness of something unnamed. Hovering just past the safety of language, the night began to scatter. One by one, neighbors drifted back through the gate, waving, carrying foil-wrapped leftovers, leaving the backyard quieter with each goodbye. The string lights still glowed, but their cheer seemed softer now. The way music lingers after most of the dancers are gone. I gathered a few cups, stacking them carefully, grateful for the small distraction of plastic and paper. When I turned, he was watching, leaning against the deck post, arms folded. Not staring, exactly, just there, like the silence itself had chosen his shape. You don't have to clean, he said. I can't help it, I replied. If my hands are busy, my thoughts behave. And are they behaving? I hesitated. Not entirely. The words slipped out before I could pull them back. His eyebrow lifted slightly, but he didn't push. Instead, he stepped closer, took the cups gently from my hand, and set them aside. His fingers didn't brush mine, not really, but the heat of possibility was there, a breath between contact and restraint. For a moment, the air thickened. The voices from inside the house, his family finishing dishes, laughter over a clattering pan blurred into background noise. We stood in the small bubble of space that the night had left just for us. I should go, I whispered, though my feet stayed. Yes, he said. His agreement came too easily, too quickly. Then, softer, but you haven't moved. The porch light hummed above us. Somewhere across the lawn, my own house loomed dark, a shadow waiting to remind me of who I was supposed to be. I imagined my husband turning over in bed, unaware of how close I stood to another threshold. I don't want to cause trouble, I said, though the tremor in my chest betrayed me. Trouble, he murmured, rarely asks permission first. He reached past me, then not for me, but for the folded blanket on the chair behind. Still, his sleeve brushed mine, and it was enough. My breath caught a small, treacherous sound in the quiet. Cold? He asked, holding out the blanket. No, I managed, but I didn't step back. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile meant to cover something riskier. Then keep it for later, he said, draping it lightly over the chair instead. His hand lingered a second too long on the fabric, knuckles whitening with restraint. The silence pressed harder. I could hear the rhythm of his breathing, steady but deeper now, as if matching mine. Our eyes met, and for an instant, it felt like the world had narrowed to the distance between us, the width of a single choice. I forced myself to turn. My voice came out quieter than I intended. Thank you for tonight. Don't thank me yet, he said, his tone both playful and warning. The first night sets the rules, or breaks them. I stepped back toward the gate, each footfall heavier than it should have been. He didn't follow, but I felt his gaze trace me all the way across the yard, through the cool breath of the night air, until my hand found the latch. The gate clicked shut behind me. Across the lawn, my house waited, its dark windows reflecting nothing, and yet, as I walked back, I carried the echo of his last words like a spark, cupped in my palm, dangerous, fragile, impossible to put down. Morning arrived without ceremony, a flat gray light pooling on the boxes like unspent coins. I woke to the ache that moving leaves in the body, and to the smaller ache of a night that had held its breath too long. My husband stood at the kitchen counter, studying a sheet of assembly instructions as if it hid a riddle only silence could solve. A coffee maker we'd bought on sale churned politely between us. I watched the drip, the way it gathered, then released, gathered then released, discipline made liquid. Did the bed hold? I asked, half smiling, because safe jokes are the currency of narrow mornings. It's fine, he said, still reading. Frame squeaks on the left. I'll fix it tonight. Party ended late, I offered. He nodded once. Met the neighbor? Yes. I reached for a mug. He was helpful. He seems like the type. The way he said type folded a judgment inside a label. What type? The social one. He poured coffee, placed my mug near me without looking up. You like that? The comment should have landed as neutral a fact about me I hadn't disputed, but it found another depth and sank. I wrapped my hands around the cup, grateful for the burn. He invited us to a barbecue next weekend, I said, too brightly. Whole block, he shrugged. If we're settled. Then, softer, like a concession he owed no one. You can go either way. Either way, the phrase hovered, weightless and heavy. I rinsed a bowl, the water humming against porcelain. Behind the sound, I heard last night again. The string lights, the way the neighbor had said welcome home like a door you weren't afraid to open. By noon the house had started to pretend we lived there. Books claimed fragile towers. Coats took hostage of a hallway chair. I found a jar of pepper paste in a cooler. Its red dark and faithful, and I felt suddenly homesick for a kitchen that remembered me. I'll grab groceries, I said. We need eggs, detergent, light bulbs. He looked relieved. I'll finish the shelves. Do you want to come? He flicked his eyes toward the living room wall, measuring a space only he could see. Better if I stay. The market sat 3 blocks down, a small store that believed in seasons and in old women's advice. The aisles were narrow, the labels chatty. I walked slowly, letting my cart heal the shape of my hands. When I reached for a dozen eggs, a second hand reached too. We both pulled back at once, a careful choreography. You again, he said, and it sounded less like surprise than like the line he'd rehearsed in case the day offered me. I live dangerously near eggs, I said. Then take the ones without hairline fractures. He tipped the carton, checking, like a man accustomed to small preventable tragedies. You okay after last night? Why wouldn't I be? He smiled at the shelf. Sometimes new air is loud the morning after. He could have asked more. He didn't. I wanted to thank him for the restraint, the way you thank a stranger for not touching a bruise. We drifted through the store in the same orbit, meeting at Necessity's dish soap, coffee filters, a bulb humming low like a choir. Near the end cap, he lifted a box of warm bulbs, and then swapped it for the daylight kind. These for your porch, he said. The ones last night made you a movie from the 70s. Beautiful, but unfair. You noticed the light, I said, and felt ridiculous for how grateful it made me. I noticed thresholds, he said lightly. It's how I avoid tripping. At checkout, he kept his distance. Outside, the afternoon had combed itself. Neat clouds lined up, like orderly thoughts. He held the door a second longer than necessary. Not for me, just long enough to make my leaving gentle. I can walk you partway, he said. I need to pass your street before I forget what errands I'm avoiding. Is that neighborly or strategic? Yes, he said, and we shared a small laugh that surprised me with its ease. We walked without brushing sleeves, the grocery bags drawing small red lines into our fingers. At the corner, he nodded toward a bench beneath an overreaching maple. Sit for a second, he suggested. Let the handles apologize to your hands. I really should get back. You should, he said, and sat first. But if you don't, I'll blame myself for poor hosting. I joined him, because the bench looked like a sentence that begged for a subject. From here our houses were half visible, the roofs making low promises. A girl biked past, her front wheel decorated with plastic flowers that refused to wilt. Culture here confuses people, he said. We offer warmth quickly and then pretend it was no big deal. In Korea, warmth takes longer. Once it arrives, it refuses to leave. He leaned back, not looking at me. What do you do when it arrives unwanted? It doesn't come uninvited, I said, and wished the certainty felt stronger in my mouth. A car turned the corner too fast. A paper cup rolled into the street and carried light like a smaller, humbler moon. He pressed his palms to his knees, as if reminding his body to stay where it was. I want to apologize, he said finally. For what? For last night at the door. For letting the moment tell me what to say. You didn't do anything wrong. That's a low bar, he murmured. I don't like bars that low. He glanced at me then, not long enough to claim, just long enough to register. I swallowed. Beneath the maple, the air smelled like sap and the memory of rain. I thought of my husband lifting a shelf into its brackets. How precise he could be with the world when the world held still. My husband doesn't like parties, I said, a confession disguised as context. He likes you, he said. I could see it in the way he didn't look up when you spoke, like the sound already lived in him. That's generous. It's practice, he said. People are not their worst tell. We stood. The bench kept our heat like a secret. Halfway down the block, a woman waved from her garden. He called back a joke about tomatoes declaring independence. I watched how easily he joined and unjoined the lives around him, at once, participant and spectator, like a tide that knows its own calendar. At my walkway he stopped again, a pace farther back than last night. He held out the box of bulbs. For the porch, he said. So your doorway stops pretending to be a confession booth. I can pay you back. You will, he said. by telling me which soup is the right one for the first honest cold. Twenjang, if the cold is humble. Yukejong, if it's proud. Then leave a note on my mailbox when the proud cold arrives. He smiled, and I could tell it was the version he offered when he wanted to stop the world from hearing what he didn't say next. I nodded, the choreography of two people learning the steps of restraint. Inside, the house smelled faintly of dust and coffee and cardboard. My husband had mounted the shelves, they held their posture like soldiers. He looked up when the door closed, taking inventory of the bags as if they might confess something the receipt would not. Eggs? Yes, I lifted them. And bulbs for the porch, daylight ones. He turned the box in his hands, as though daylight could be measured. Good, he said. It was too yellow. He didn't ask who had chosen them. I didn't say. I felt the conversation we weren't having. Take a seat at the table, polite but unignorable. That night we installed the bulb. Together, he on the step stool, me holding the base steady. The old glass came away with a brittle sigh. The new one cooled the darkness with a clean, forgiving blue. In the doorway, our shadows fell side by side, then separated when he stepped down. Better, he said. Better, I echoed, though some part of me missed the softness of the yellow, the way it made last night look further back than it really was. Later, while he measured the living room for a rug he hadn't chosen yet, I took the trash out. The bins waited at the curb like obedient dogs. Across the street, the neighbor stood at his mailbox, addressing an envelope with a careful, slanted hand. He looked up once, only once. It was enough to make me aware of my own breath again. He lifted the envelope slightly, a neutral gesture, not a wave, not a signal. I placed the trash lid down gently, as if sound itself could make a promise. The porch light behind me cast its new daylight across the walkway, erasing the film the night had favored. Good light, he called quietly across the street, voice pitched not to carry but to arrive. It's honest, I answered. He nodded. Then we'll have to be, too. I stood there a second longer than I should have, the bag tie cutting into my fingers, the air clear enough to inventory. Then I turned back into the house where boxes still waited for names, and beside them, a man who knew how to build things that hold, and somewhere between without choosing a side. Yet me, rehearsing the shape of a choice I hadn't made but could now imagine. Evening spread across the house like a blanket too thin for warmth. The shelves my husband had mounted stood straight, obedient, while he measured the next wall for frames we hadn't yet unpacked. His focus clung to the tape measure, the pencil mark, the tidy arithmetic of a space that did not invite questions. I set down 2 bowls of soup, steam circling up as if to compensate for our silence. He sat, thanked me briefly, and ate with the precision of someone timing each bite. I watched the soup cool in my own bowl, appetite dulled by a weight I couldn't name aloud. How was the market? He asked suddenly. Busy, I said. A lot of new faces. He nodded. You'll get used to it. That was the extent of his curiosity. No question about who I spoke to, what I carried back, what words I fumbled over in English. The silence that followed wasn't cruel, it was simply the silence of a man who believed survival required only completion of tasks. I wanted to tell him about the maple tree, about the way light bent differently through its leaves, about the box of bulbs now glowing honestly above our door, but I didn't. The words felt like contraband. After dinner, he returned to the shelves, adjusting angles no one else would notice. I cleaned the dishes, the clatter echoing louder than intended. At one point, he looked over. You don't have to slam them, he said. I wasn't. Sounded like you did. I turned back to the sink. Maybe the plates just wanted attention. The joke hung between us, unreceived. He returned to his work, and I returned to my quiet rebellion of rinsing carefully, too carefully, until the porcelain shone. Later, when he went upstairs to shower, I stepped onto the porch. The new daylight bulb illuminated the yard, with a sharpness that felt more like confession than comfort. Across the street, the neighbor's yard lay in softer darkness, a few string lights still humming from the night before. And there he was kneeling near his flower beds, watering can in hand. As if the dusk itself had called him out, he looked up, sensing me before I spoke. "Good timing," he said softly across the quiet street. "These flowers complain if they miss their evening drink." I smiled despite myself. I didn't think plants could be so demanding. "They learn from us," he said. "They see what thirst looks like." The words carried further than they should have. I crossed my arms, hugging the sweater closer, aware of how exposed the porch light made me. He seemed to notice, because he tilted his own lamp off, letting the shadows soften. "Better?" he asked. "Yes," I admitted. "Too much light can be honest. And honesty is dangerous." Sometimes. We stood there, divided by asphalt but joined by something far less visible. My husband's shadow passed briefly across the upstairs curtain. I froze, certain he would come down, open the door, ask why I lingered. But the shadow faded. The curtain fell still. The neighbor placed the watering can down, straightened, and brushed dirt from his hands. "Next weekend," he said quietly. "Barbecue, come if you can." I swallowed. "I'll see. I'll be waiting," he answered, voice pitched low enough that it could have been meant for the plants, the pavement, or only for me. When I finally turned back inside, the house greeted me with the clean, mechanical smell of soap and metal from the upstairs shower. My husband called down, "Light looks good." "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "It's honest." But even as I said it, I carried another sentence inside me. One I couldn't voice. Honesty was beginning to feel like the very thing I couldn't afford. The weekend settled over the neighborhood like a long exhale. Lawnmowers hummed in staggered intervals, dogs barked in lazy chorus, and the air smelled faintly of charcoal from some other family's grill. I tried to fold laundry, but my hands moved slowly, distracted by the rhythm of life happening just outside the window. My husband lay on the couch, remote in hand, flicking channels without interest. Sports, news, a rerun of a show he never finished. He watched each for seconds, then moved on, as if commitment even to distraction cost too much. "Do you want to walk later?" I asked carefully. He shrugged. "Too tired. You've been inside all day." "So?" He shifted, the couch groaning louder than his voice. The conversation dissolved there, unfinished like so many others. I folded another shirt, pressing out creases that would return the moment it was worn. A knock at the door startled me. 3 short taps, confident but not loud. My husband didn't move. "Can you get it?" he murmured, already returning his eyes to the screen. When I opened the door, he was there, casual, hands empty, as though presence alone was enough offering. "Sorry to interrupt," the neighbor said. "I made too much lemonade. Thought you might want some." "That's kind," I managed. Behind me, the television's chatter spilled into the hall. My husband didn't look up. The neighbor noticed. I could tell his eyes flicked past me, once, brief and assessing, then returned. "I'll just leave it here," he said. He lifted the pitcher slightly, condensation sliding down its side. "You can bring it in," I heard myself say, too quickly. He hesitated, then stepped inside, shoes brushing the threshold. The air shifted, a subtle change that only I seemed to register. "Lemonade?" I called to the living room. "Fine," my husband answered, not turning. The neighbor poured 2 glasses, handed one to me, one to the table beside the couch. "Fresh mint?" he said lightly. "Grew it myself." "Thanks," my husband replied without reaching for the glass. The moment stretched awkwardly. The neighbor's eyes met mine just for a second, no longer, but in that second, the silence between us grew. Louder than the TV, louder than the hum of the fridge, louder than anything else. I set my glass down too fast, the rim clinking against the table. My husband glanced over, puzzled, then returned to the screen. The neighbor smiled faintly, a shield for both of us, and straightened. "I should let you rest," he said. "Thank you for the lemonade," I whispered. At the door, as he stepped back into the sunlight, He leaned close enough that only I could hear. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. Be careful what you let it say. My pulse quickened. I closed the door carefully, as though noise itself might betray me. When I turned, my husband was already reaching for the remote again, his glass of lemonade untouched. The house felt suddenly divided, two worlds occupying the same walls, one of routine, muted and safe, another of glances, pauses, and the dangerous electricity of being seen. And standing between them, I realized, was me pretending not to notice that the ground beneath my feet was beginning to tilt. Morning thinned the air to something almost clean. The porch light, our new, honest one, switched itself off at 7, as if even light knew when to stop telling the truth. My husband stood by the sink, holding the untouched glass of lemonade from yesterday. Condensation had drawn a pale ring on the coaster, a quiet clock that had kept its own time through the night. Who brought this? He asked. The neighbor, I said. He made extra. He nodded, the kind of nod that accepts a fact, while cross-examining it behind the eyes. He lifted the glass, sniffed the mint, set it down. Friendly street. It is, I said, careful with the softness of my tone. We ate in small sounds, fork against plate, chair leg on wood. He glanced at the porch once, then at the bulbs box I'd left on the counter by mistake. His thumb ran over the barcode like a man reading Braille. You bought these yesterday? At the market. He looked at me, then past me, toward the window that framed the neighbor's yard. Good price, he said mildly. You kept the receipt? It's in the bag. The lie was small and immediate, and I hated how ready it felt in my mouth. After breakfast he left for an errand he didn't specify. I cleaned the kitchen longer than necessary. When I took the trash out, an envelope lay on our mat, misdelivered, rubber banded with 3 others. All were addressed to the neighbor. The top one bore a return address from a hospital. The long, polite name of cardiology spelled with the patience of Latin. I held the stack a second too long. The paper felt heavier than its weight. Across the street, the retired nurse was clipping rose canes in her yard. Mail mix-up? She called. Yes, I said. She nodded toward the envelope. He had a scare last winter, she said, voice gentle but factual. Nothing dramatic in the end. Doctors told him to slow down. He laughed. She snipped a stem with merciful precision. He's good at pretending the serious things are hobbies. I looked at the hospital's name again, then at the neat slope of his handwriting on yesterday's envelope I'd seen at dusk. Is he alone? Legally, no. Practically, she let the sentence choose its own ending. People carry their own weather. Then, softer, you're new. Be careful not to catch a storm trying to be kind. I crossed the street with the bundle. He opened the door before I could knock, as if misdelivered. Things have their own sound. Special delivery, I said. Ah, he smiled. This street treats mail like communal property. He took the stack, his thumb pausing over the hospital logo only long enough to acknowledge it. A shadow crossed his face, then left, as if trained to. Everything all right? I asked before I could stop myself. Old paperwork, he said lightly. Evidence that I'm supposed to sleep more and perform less. His eyes warmed, no self-pity, just a ledger note. Thank you. Behind him, the house smelled like lemon oil and pages. A radio murmured from a room I couldn't see. He leaned a shoulder against the frame, not blocking, not inviting, as if the doorway were Switzerland. About yesterday, he said, I didn't mean to walk into your living room like a salesman. You brought lemonade, not a contract. Both can be dangerous, he said. The smile didn't reach his eyes this time. I started to answer, but my phone vibrated, a text from my husband. Can you pick up the blue screws from the hardware store? The shelves. No emojis, no question mark, just the task, like a hand-drawn map to safety. I have to run an errand, I said. Of course. He stepped back a half pace. Hardware store near the market. Ask for Eli. He'll tell you which screws your wall respects. Does everyone here know everyone? We pretend to, he said. It keeps us from thinking too hard about what we don't. The hardware store smelled like cut wood and old advice. A bell announced me. A man with a name tag that said Eli looked up from a row of nails. "You're the new porch light," he said cheerfully. "Daylight bulb. Brave choice. Do lights have reputations?" I asked. "In this town, yes," he said. "Bright means honest, honest means new." He bagged the screws and lowered his voice, not conspiratorial, just kind. "If you're talking to the neighbor, he's a good man. Keeps his losses quiet. Don't let the quiet fool you." "What losses?" The question came out too fast. Eli shrugged. "The kind that rearrange a house without moving furniture." He pushed the bag across the counter. "We take care of each other by not asking, and by asking at the right time." Outside, the afternoon had the clean-edged look of a day that refused drama. Still, a thin, electric thread ran under it. On the walk back, I passed the nurse's yard again. She lifted her clippers in greeting. "Tell your husband not to overload those shelves," she called. "Men think studs are a suggestion." I smiled and promised to relay the message. When I reached our steps, my husband opened the door, as if he'd heard my key from halfway down the block. "Screws?" he asked. I handed him the bag. He weighed it in his palm. "Thanks." He gestured toward the porch light. "That bulb's strong." "It is." I stayed on the threshold. "You texted earlier. You needed anything else?" He looked at my face a fraction longer than usual, a pause that minted suspicion without spending it. "No." We worked on opposite sides of the same room for an hour, him measuring, me sorting books into piles that didn't matter. At one point he stood, spine stiff, and said, "Let's skip next weekend's barbecue." I thought I'm not in the mood to socialize, and I don't want our first month to be noisy. He kept his eyes on the tape measure, as if the numbers could justify the sentence. "It's better if people don't think if you," he stopped. "If I what?" My voice was calm. I felt it shaking only after. He exhaled, a sound that wanted to be a laugh and failed. "It's a friendly street." Too friendly. There it was, not a question but a verdict delivered without a trial. Something cold unspooled inside me. I stacked books more carefully. That evening, while he showered, a soft knock sounded at the door, one, then two, like someone reminding the house it had a heartbeat. I didn't move. The knock came again. When I finally opened it, the neighbor stood on the step with a small paper bag. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "This fell in with the mail." He held out a bent postcard addressed to our house from the previous owners. On the back, a messy drawing of a dog with a birthday hat. Thought it might be an omen for adopting a large animal with poor boundaries. I shouldn't have smiled, but I did. "We have our hands full with shelves." "Shelves," he repeated, as if the word itself were a species. He shifted the bag in his hand. "Also, I made too much soup. It's un-American to waste it." "My husband doesn't have to like soup," he said gently. "I can leave it and run before it implicates you." We stood there with the bag between us like a neutral country. Upstairs, the water shut off. The house inhaled. "Leave it," I said. "Thank you." He did. Our fingers didn't touch. Still, something in the air tilted. "And," he added, voice low, gaze steady. "But careful, if anyone asks, I was never here." It wasn't flirtation, it was cover, a kindness shaped like smoke. I closed the door slowly. When I turned, my husband was in the hallway, towel around his neck, hair damp, eyes unreadable. "Who was that?" "The neighbor," I said. "Misdelivered postcard. Soup." He looked at the bag, then at me. His jaw moved, then stilled. "We'll eat it," he said finally, as if choosing generosity were a form of control. "It's wasteful not to." We ate in the clean light of the porch bulb. The soup was simple and good. We said thank you to no one aloud. Afterward he stacked the bowls, then stood at the sink. A long time, water running over dishes that were already clean. "People here," he said at last, not looking up. "They're quick to step inside." "It's a small street." He shut the faucet, The pipes shuddered like something catching its breath. He dried his hands, turned, and studied me with a gaze I recognized from years ago, the one he used when he couldn't name a problem but knew one existed. "Tell me if there's something I should know," he said. For a second, the house fell so quiet, I could hear the thin rattle of the new bulb cooling on its own filament. I thought of the hospital envelope, of Eli's careful words, of the nurse's clipped warning. I thought of last night's doorstep, and how close the world had felt in that square of light. "There isn't," I said. The sentence was true in every way that made it safe, and false in every way that made it dangerous. He nodded once, not convinced, not unconvinced. "All right." He placed the towel over the chair back. "Let's get some sleep." When he turned off the kitchen light, the porch flooded the room with its daylight honesty. Our faces looked different in it, sharper, harder to lie to. On my way upstairs, I paused at the door and heard my own voice, uninvited, shape itself to fill the space he'd left. "If anyone asks," I whispered to the empty hallway, "nothing happened." The house held the sentence. Outside, somewhere between two porches, the street kept our secrets the way small places do, by knowing them too well to repeat them. The next morning the house woke before I did, or maybe it never slept. I heard my husband moving downstairs, the muted thump of drawers opening, closing. By the time I came down, he was at the table, laptop open, coffee cooling beside him. "You're up early," I said carefully. "Couldn't sleep," he answered. His eyes didn't leave the screen. I poured my own cup, sat across from him. He scrolled, stopped, scrolled again. The light from the porch bulb spilled through the window, too sharp for morning. "What are you reading?" I asked. "Neighborhood forum," he said. "People here share everything." His tone was flat, but something underneath was alive, watchful. "Anything interesting?" "Your friend the neighbor organizes half the events. Runs a committee, manages fundraisers. Looks like he used to coach Little League before something." "Before what?" He shrugged, but his eyes narrowed at the screen. "No posts for a few months. Then suddenly, back again. People said he was sick." He looked at me then, direct. "Did he tell you that?" The air stiffened. I stirred my coffee, though it didn't need stirring. "He mentioned being told to rest more." My husband shut the laptop slowly, as though closing evidence. "He seems too comfortable, too fast. With you." I forced a laugh. "He's like that with everyone. It's cultural." Americans are friendly," he cut in. "But not everyone takes friendliness the same way." I set the spoon down. "Are you saying I'm misreading?" "I'm saying I know how men look when they're just friendly." He held my gaze long enough that I couldn't pretend he wasn't accusing. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. A sharp, bright sound that sliced the air. My husband stood. "I'll get it." I followed, heart rattling in my chest. When the door opened, there he was again, my neighbor, a paper bag in his hand, this time with bread still warm enough to fog the wrapping. "Baked too much," he said with practiced ease. "Sharing the guilt." My husband's expression was unreadable. "That's generous." He took the bag without stepping aside. "We appreciate it." The neighbor glanced at me once, quick but not hidden. "Hope you enjoy," he said. Then, after a beat, "We're having a planning meeting tonight, community garden. Everyone's welcome." "I'll let her know," my husband said before I could answer. The door closed. The bread sat heavy on the counter. My husband stood there a moment longer, fingers tightening on the bag as though it weighed far more than flour and yeast. "He looks at you too much," he said quietly. "You're imagining." "Am I?" He carried the bread to the kitchen, placed it down harder than necessary. Then he turned, eyes tired but sharp. "I'm not blind," he said. "Don't make me feel like I am." The sentence burned. I wanted to tell him nothing had happened, that nothing was happening, that the danger lived not in actions, but in the pause between them, in glances and silences and air that thickened when it shouldn't. But those words would have betrayed me more than silence. Instead I said, "It's just bread." He stared, then laughed once short, without humor. "Bread," he repeated. Right. He left the room. Upstairs, a door closed. I stayed at the counter, staring at the bread as if it might confess something I couldn't. When I finally turned, I saw movement outside the window. The neighbor was walking back across his yard, hands in pockets, shoulders set like a man who had offered more than bread and received less than he wanted. And for the first time, I wondered if the past he carried, the hospital, the silence, the gaps in his timeline, was less about illness and more about choices that looked too much like the one standing in front of me now. That evening the house felt heavier, as if suspicion itself had settled into the walls. My husband spent most of the afternoon upstairs, the steady rhythm a hammer announcing his distance. I moved quietly through the rooms, every sound sharp against the silence. Water filling a pot, a drawer sliding closed, the tick of the porch bulb cooling after sunset. Near dusk, I heard voices outside. I peered through the curtain. Neighbors gathered by the garden across the street. Chairs pulled into a circle, laughter rising and falling with a rhythm of old stories. Among them, I saw him, the neighbor, head tilted, listening, smiling in that easy way that seemed to loosen the entire group. I wanted to stay hidden, but his gaze drifted, found me at the window. It didn't linger long, just a glance, polite enough for anyone watching, but heavy enough that I stepped back, heart quickening. Later, my husband came down, wiping sawdust from his hands. They're loud tonight, he said, nodding toward the garden. It's just a meeting, I offered. Did he invite you? Yes, earlier, of course he did. His tone carried no question, only verdict. I turned back to the sink, rinsing dishes that didn't need rinsing. Behind me, he said, do you know why he disappeared last year? I froze. Disappeared? For months, my husband continued. The forum posts, the events, nothing. Then suddenly he's back, like nothing happened. People don't just vanish without reason. He was ill, I said, repeating what little I'd heard. Maybe, my husband's voice lowered, or maybe not. People talk. A fight with his wife, papers filed, then withdrawn. Money missing from a fundraiser. No one knows which part is true, but something happened. I turned, hands damp, breath caught between defense and denial. You've been asking about him? I've been listening, he said sharply. Because you don't. The accusation cut deeper than I expected. Before I could answer, there was a knock at the door, soft, measured, too familiar. My husband stiffened. I'll get it, I said quickly. When I opened the door, he stood there again, but not with bread or soup this time. Just himself, framed by the dim glow of the streetlight. Sorry, he began. We finished late. I thought you might want these. He lifted a small packet of seeds, herbs, neatly labeled. My husband's footsteps echoed behind me. He stopped at the hall's edge. You're persistent, he said coldly. The neighbor's smile held, but his eyes shifted. Persistent? Or polite? Polite doesn't knock after dark, my husband answered. For a moment, the air in the doorway felt like a trial. I didn't mean to intrude, the neighbor said finally, softer now. He held out the seeds toward me. Just thought a new house needs roots. I reached out before I could stop myself. Our fingers didn't touch, but the closeness felt louder than contact. Thank you, I said. My husband's gaze burned on both of us. Enough for tonight, he said. We're tired. The neighbor inclined his head, stepping back into the night. Of course, rest well. The door closed, the latch clicking louder than usual. I turned, seeds still in hand, guilt heavy in my palm. My husband studied me. You believe everything he says? It was just seeds. It's never just anything, he said, voice low. Not with men like him. I wanted to argue, but the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I placed the seeds on the counter, trying to make them ordinary. But even ordinary things can carry weight, and I felt it pressing long after he had gone. That night, as I lay in bed, the porch light spilled through the blinds, too bright, too honest. Beside me, my husband's breathing was steady but restless. a rhythm that spoke of doubt he wouldn't name. And across the street, in the dimmer yard beyond the glow, I imagined him too awake, carrying whatever past had made him vanish once already, a past that now threatened to pull me with it. The week slid forward with the stubborn grace of wet leaves. By Thursday the air had a metallic taste, and even the porch bulb looked harsher, like it had stopped forgiving our faces. That afternoon the retired nurse knocked with a tin of cookies, and a warning disguised as gossip. "Streets buzzing," she said. "Somebody's camera caught a coyote by the creek." Also she lowered her voice. "Garden funds are short again. People are whispering. Your neighbor will hate that." She patted my arm once, brisk and kind. "Keep your doors latched. Coyotes don't knock." When she left, the house felt smaller. I placed the cookies on the counter and read the label on the seed packet. He'd given me time, parsley, mint, roots, waiting for a place to believe in. Near dusk, my husband texted running late. Contractor came by, eat without me. I tapped OK, then deleted the word and sent it anyway. The street turned lavender, that indecisive hour, when everyone looks like a photograph taken by someone who loved them. I stepped onto the porch to breathe and found him already on the sidewalk, hands in his jacket, gaze tilted up as if studying whether he couldn't change. "You always come out when the light goes thoughtful," he said. "You always happen to be passing," I answered, aiming for neutral. "I live here," he said, smiling, "and I'm trying to." We stood within the polite geometry of neighbors. He nodded toward the seed packet on the hall table behind me. "Did you plant them?" "Not yet." "That's fair," he said. "Some things are better as promises." He shifted, about to go, then hesitated. "There's a fundraiser meeting at the community center. They think money's missing." "It isn't." His jaw tightened. "It's sitting in an account with my name on it, because the treasurer froze the transfer when I was sick." Nobody wants to hear that part. They want a story with a villain who lives next door. "I'm sorry," I said. "It came out truer than I meant." "Don't be," he answered gently. "Just if people ask, tell them I'm irritating, not dishonest." He half laughed. "I can live with irritating." A car turned onto the street too fast, headlights flaring across us. Reflexively, he stepped closer, as if to shield me from brightness. We didn't touch. The light stripped us of alibis, and when it passed the space we'd left between our bodies hummed like a wire under tension. "Careful," he murmured. "With cars?" "With light." The porch behind me clicked the latch, soft but unmistakable. My husband stood in the doorway, earlier than his text, hair damp from the cold, eyes taking in more than I could unshow. For an instant, the three of us formed an awkward constellation: husband in the threshold, neighbor on the sidewalk, me pinned between. "We were just talking," I said, the sentence already thin. "About money," the neighbor added calmly, as if pulling the match away from the fuse. "Community center confusion." My husband's gaze moved from him to me and back. Convenient confusion. Silence pooled. Somewhere down the block a dog barked and was shushed by a voice I couldn't see. "I should go," the neighbor said, stepping back. "Meetings in 20. He nodded to my husband. "Good evening." To me, softer plant mint by the kitchen door. "It forgives mistakes." He left without hurry, without apology. That was somehow worse. Inside, the house held its breath. My husband shut the door gently, which felt louder than a slam. "You texted me okay," he said. "Were you telling me to come home? Or not to?" "I was telling you I heard you." He studied my face, searching for a place to set down his doubt. "People keep saying his name like a solution." "They say it like a problem," I said. "I'm not using it for either." He exhaled. The air fogged and cleared between us. "I need you to come with me tonight," he said finally. "To the hardware store. We'll choose the rug runners. We'll be seen together." It was not a request. It was a strategy, a line drawn with fluorescent tape. "Okay," I said, and meant it and didn't. We walked the bright aisles, like tourists in a country where everything was labeled and nothing translated. He compared textures with the severity of a judge. I nodded when he nodded. We spoke practically, like colleagues who respected each other's calendars. Halfway through, his phone vibrated. He turned away to answer, voice low. I drifted to the end cap where clearance items went to practice humility. A small display TV looped footage from the community center, a wide shot of the multi-purpose room, chairs in a circle, people entering, settling. The timestamp reads 658. The door opened again, and my neighbor stepped in, a folder under his arm, expression open and steady. Two faces turned away, another pair didn't. On the screen, you could almost see the room choosing its story. I stood there too long, watching people I barely knew rehearse their lines. My husband returned, followed my gaze, and frowned. "We came here to pick a rug," he said. "I know." I turned the screen off. The reflection caught us, two outlines briefly fused by glass, then separated. Outside, the night had gone clear and cold. We walked home with a rolled runner, tucked under his arm, the fluorescent receipt sticking out like a flag. At our gate, a figure detached from the darker seam of hedge. The retired nurse, scarf tight around her neck. "Lock your cars," she said in lieu of greeting. "Coyotes are one thing, people are another." She looked between us, reading the air with the accuracy of her old profession. "They're picking sides at the center," she added. "If anyone asks, I saw him last winter in a hospital chair, telling jokes to a man who had none left. People forget the right details first." She moved on, her shadow neat and practiced. We stood in the yard she left behind. "Let's go inside," my husband said. It sounded like surrender and protection at once. We laid the runner in the hall. It made a path where there hadn't been one, which felt optimistic in a way that embarrassed me. He stepped back, hands on his hips, and nodded. "Better," he said. The porch bulb hummed. In its clean, unforgiving light, the runner looked almost honest. I fetched the seed packet without thinking, and set it on the table beside the cookies. My husband watched the motion, then surprised me by saying, "Plant them tomorrow. By the kitchen, we'll buy a pot." The word reached me like heat on cold hands. I wanted to say yes quickly so I wouldn't ruin it, but above us the bulb ticked, cooling, and the sound felt like time taking notes. "You're sure?" I asked. "I'm sure we need something that grows," he said. "Here, us." We stood with that sentence between us until the doorbell rang. Not a knock this time, a chime, clear and formal. My husband went still. I opened it. Two people stood on the porch, a woman in a city jacket with a clipboard, and the community center director I'd only seen in photos. The clipboard woman smiled in a way that had no temperature. "Sorry for the hour," she said. "We're checking with neighbors about some irregularities in the garden account. Have you noticed anything unusual?" Her eyes slid past my shoulder, into our hallway, onto the seed packet with a label that was suddenly too legible. Behind me, my husband stepped close enough that I could feel the shape of his arm without touching it. "We were at the store," he said evenly. "Rugs." The director's smile tightened. "Of course, this will only take a minute." She looked back at me. "Do you know Mr. Next Door well?" The question landed like a rail spike. A second choice opened under my feet, clean as a cut. I held her gaze and felt the week, the seeds, the bulb, the hospital envelope, the lemonade, the runner. All of it stacked inside my chest like evidence and alibi. Then I heard his earlier sentence again, the most neighborly instruction in the world: plant mint by the kitchen door. "It forgives mistakes." "I know him enough to say this," I answered, voice steady. "He returns what isn't his." Clipboard woman wrote something down that might have agreed, or might have disagreed. The director thanked us, both of them polite as winter, and left us in the doorway with our light and our runner and our unmade choices. When the door shut, the house seemed to lean toward me, waiting for an outcome I couldn't yet supply. My husband let out a breath, not relief exactly, more like the sound a man makes when he chooses to stand still. "We'll plant tomorrow," he repeated. "Tomorrow?" I said. "Out on the street, The community center doors clicked closed in the cold. Somewhere between the two porches, the line I'd been skirting drew itself darker, as if to say choose soon, or it will choose for you. The night after the clipboard visit, sleep refused me. I lay in bed listening to my husband's steady breathing, but every creak of the house sounded like a question. Around 2, I gave up, slipped downstairs, and sat by the kitchen window. The porch bulb lit the yard with its merciless honesty, and beyond it, the neighbor's house sat in gentler dark, one lamp glowing faintly through the blinds. I told myself not to look, but I did, and when I did, I saw him seated at a desk, near the window, pen moving across paper. He wasn't watching for me, he was writing. The tilt of his shoulders carried a weariness I hadn't seen in the laughter of barbecues. When he leaned back and rubbed his chest briefly, the movement tightened something in me. The hospital envelope, the nurse's warning, Eli's careful phrasing, the story he hadn't told sat there in the shadows with him, daring me to invent its missing pieces. The floor above me creaked. My husband stirred, then stilled again. I drew the curtain shut. Morning brought an uneasy peace. My husband made coffee, handed me a mug. His voice was casual, but the kind of casual that has sharp edges. They came by late, he said. Yes, you handled it well. He looked at me, long enough to measure the truth. But they'll be back. I sipped carefully. It's not about us. Everything is about us, he said quietly. If people want to see a story, they'll write one. By afternoon, the block was buzzing. Neighbors out front, talking too long at mailboxes, waving too little. A current of suspicion ran under the small talk. I stepped onto the porch, seed packet in my hand, thinking maybe planting would tether me to something safe. I knelt by the railing, scraping a shallow trench into the soil. The air smelled like damp earth and beginnings. You picked mint, a voice said softly. I looked up. He was there, leaning over the fence, not too close, not too far. It's forgiving, I said, or forgetful, he answered, depending on what you need. We stayed like that, the air between us charged with words unsaid. I heard about last night, he continued. The questions, they came here too. I'm sorry. He looked down at my hands in the soil. If they drag you into this, they already did, I said, sharper than intended. Silence fell. A car passed slowly, its headlights glancing over us like an interrogation lamp. I yanked the seed packet shut, brushing dirt from my palms. Suddenly, aware of how it must look me kneeling here, him hovering close, the car slowed further. Inside, I recognized one of the community volunteers, eyes flicking toward us before rolling on. My neighbor exhaled. Careful, he murmured. I know. Then why are we still standing like this? I didn't answer. My heart beat too loudly for honesty. From inside the house, the sound of a door opening. My husband's footsteps approached, steady, unmistakable. The neighbor straightened, stepping back from the fence. I should go. His voice was louder now, performative, meant to be overheard. Mint will take root fast. You'll have more than you can handle. By the time my husband reached the porch, he was halfway down the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, pace casual but deliberate. My husband looked at the seed packet, then at me. You're planting? Yes. Good. He studied the soil on my palms. Let's hope it grows where it should. He turned back inside. The words carried more than gardening. That night, as I washed the dirt from my hands, I thought of the car slowing, the clipboard questions, the way suspicion fed on glimpses. We hadn't done anything, and yet the air itself was guilty. When I turned off the faucet, the house was quiet, too quiet. Even the porch bulb hummed lower, as if it had grown tired of telling the truth. Saturday evening brought the barbecue, though it felt less like celebration and more like a stage. Cars lined the street, children darted between yards, and the smell of smoke hung low and insistent. Everyone seemed louder, brighter, as though noise itself could smother suspicion. My husband didn't want to go, but the neighborhood had ways of pulling people in. We carried a store-bought salad, his choice, practical and impersonal, and crossed the street together. He walked beside me, not touching, but close enough to mark territory. The yard buzzed with conversation. Lanterns hung from trees, laughter punctured the air in bursts. The neighbor stood near the grill, apron tied carelessly, tongs in hand. When he saw us, he smiled wide enough for the group, smaller for me. "Glad you made it," he said. "Of course," my husband answered flatly. Plates were passed, drinks poured. I tried to dissolve into the crowd, but eyes lingered longer than usual. The clipboard woman was there, chatting with the nurse, her glance drifting our way more than once. Halfway through the evening, I excused myself to the side of the yard, near the lemon tree. The night was cooler there, quieter, or it should have been. He found me, inevitably, a plate balanced in one hand. "They'll start on desserts soon," he said. "That's when people loosen secrets." "I don't want secrets," I whispered. "Neither do I." He set the plate down, voice softening. "But the street already thinks it has ours." The way he said ours made my pulse falter. A shadow moved my husband, stepping out from the crowd, eyes narrowing as he spotted us. For one terrifying second, the three of us aligned again, just like that night on the porch. I stepped back quickly, nearly bumping the tree. "I should get more napkins," I said too loudly, but the damage was done. My husband's gaze sharpened, suspicion no longer hidden. He walked over slowly, each step measured. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "Garden rumors," the neighbor answered smoothly, too smoothly. She was asking what's true. My husband's eyes slid to me. "And what did he say?" "That he's irritating, not dishonest." I managed, the line rehearsed in my chest. For a moment, no one spoke. Then laughter from the other side of the yard broke the silence, covering us. My husband nodded once, curt, and turned back toward the table, but his shoulders stayed stiff, his jaw locked. The neighbor waited until he was gone, then leaned closer, voice barely audible. "That was close, too close," I whispered. "Then maybe it's time to choose." I opened my mouth, but another voice cut through the clipboard woman, calling the group together for a toast. Glasses lifted, catching the string lights like small fires. I raised mine too, though my hand trembled. From across the rim, I saw my husband watching me, watching him, watching us, and in that moment, I knew the line we had been skirting all along wasn't invisible anymore. It was written clear as firelight across every face in that yard. "Say it plainly, what were you doing with him under that tree?" The question snapped like wire. Morning had not yet warmed the house. The new runner felt cold under my bare feet. My husband held his phone between us, the neighborhood forum open to a photo posted at dawn. A wide shot of last night's barbecue, lanterns, like pale moons, and in one corner, the lemon tree. Me and the neighbor, angled close enough for strangers to draw straight lines. "It's the angle," I said. "It's a second in a long night." "It's a sentence without a period," he replied. "And everyone is finishing it for you." Comments marched below, the image jokes shaped like knives, the kind of concern that arrives with wet hands. Someone had circled us in red, another had typed context, the way people request permission to believe the worst. He dropped the phone onto the table. "I asked you to come with me, to be seen, together." I did, not when it counted. The house rearranged itself around the argument chairs squarer, air thinner. Outside, a delivery truck exhaled at the curb, like something deciding whether to stay. A knock landed on our door. 1, 2, 3 official, practiced. My husband stiffened. I opened it. Clipboard woman stood there again, the community center director a pace behind, and today a third figure, a man with a soft badge clipped to his belt and a calm voice. He'd probably used to talk to people at smaller cliffs than ours. "Sorry to intrude," the clipboard said, but her tone had no apology left. "A few questions about last night. There are perceptions forming." She let that word do all the dirty work. My husband stepped into the hall beside me, shoulders set. "Perceptions about fundraising?" "Or my wife?" "Both," she said, not unkindly. "It was worse that way." When stories braid, they don't separate cleanly. The director shifted, attempted grace. Your neighbor arrived early, left late, offered to reconcile the garden books. Some felt managed, others grateful. She looked past me toward the seed packet on our table. You two are often seen speaking. People noticed patterns. The word clung to the walls like mildew. Behind them, a voice from the sidewalk. If you have questions, ask me. He was there, as if he'd been waiting for the house to produce a scene, and he'd walked in on cue. He looked tired, older by a hard week, but steady. No apron, no easy grin. A folder in his hand, edges thumb bent. The badge man turned. Sir, we're gathering context. Context is what thieves use, my husband said, voice low and hot. He's been stealing money and time he doesn't own. The neighbor didn't flinch. He lifted the folder. Bank statements, transfers frozen during the months I was sick. He glanced at me, just once. I told you that part. No one wants the dull truth. Clipboard woman took the papers. The badge man read quickly, relief, trying and failing to show itself. The director's shoulders softened a notch. It should have helped. It didn't. And the photo? My husband pressed. Explain that. The neighbor's eyes met his, then mine. No theatrics, no smirk. I stepped closer when a car swept its headlights. She stepped back. The light made a story. You're deciding to believe it. Don't speak like you're generous, my husband said. You knock, you bring things, you stay. I brought soup, he said quietly, because it is un-American to waste it and unkind to keep it. He paused, choosing a narrower bridge. But if you need me to be a villain, to keep your house standing, I understand the math. Something in the way he said it level, almost kind, set the fuse to the other powder in the room. My husband turned to me. Do I need a villain? He asked. Or do I already have one? I should have said it then. I should have said nothing happened, nothing. But the word nothing had stretched too thin to carry this much proof and projection. I stood there with a mouth full of honest facts and guilty silences, and somewhere between them was the answer that could have saved us. I didn't cross a line, I said. You stood with your toes on it, he answered. And the badge man looked down, because even trained witnesses know when they've watched something break. Across the street, the nurse paused at her gate, taking in the geometry of our porch, the tight cluster of bodies, the folder like a prop. She began walking over with the unhurried urgency of someone who's sprinted in other hallways. Clipboard woman cleared her throat. The funds look accounted for, she said, reluctantly. Fair, we'll confirm with the bank. As for the photo, we can ask the poster to remove it, but you know how screenshots work. We know, my husband said, eyes still on me, as if deletion were a sacrament he no longer believed in. The nurse reached the bottom step, breath only lightly touched by the hill. Before everyone chooses their favorite ending, she said, remember the winter that made him vanish. I have the wristband and the half-told jokes to prove it. She looked at my husband, then at me. People survive one kind of failure by failing somewhere else. Be careful which. It rattled him. I saw it. He swallowed. What are you asking me to be careful about? About being right, she said simply. It doesn't always keep you warm. The neighbor pressed his palm briefly to his sternum, an involuntary check only some eyes would catch. The badge man did, stepped forward a half pace. You okay, sir? Fine, he said, which didn't answer the question. He reached for the folder again, fingers an inch slower than his voice. My husband saw the pause, too, and hatred found a new, cruel shape. Don't use your heart as a doorstop, he snapped. If you're guilty, be guilty. If you're sick, go inside. Silence threw a sheet over all of us. The nurse flinched. The clipboard woman looked at her shoes. For a second the neighbor's face emptied. No charm, no practiced ease, just a man absorbing an impact he hadn't earned, or perhaps had, in some other life, exactly earned. When he spoke, it was to me, not to my husband. I won't knock again, he said. No anger, just a decision that didn't need witnesses. He turned, The folder slid under his arm. Halfway down the walk he staggered, just a fraction, the kind of misstep a person turns into a cough. The nurse moved first, the badge man second. The folder fell, paper curling open like white fish in a net. My body moved without permission. "Sit," the nurse ordered, voice switching to the one that makes rooms obey. He took the step, breath shallow. She pressed 2 fingers to his pulse and frowned. "It's not a drama," she said to the air, to all of us. "It's a heart deciding if it wants to be." "Cool," the badge man told my husband. "Now." He shoved his phone toward him, as if the device itself needed to learn better owners. My husband's hands shook, anger translated into electricity with nowhere to go. He dialed. He gave our address to a calm voice far away, his own voice, breaking on the number. I knelt on the cold runner of the porch steps, the one we'd bought to make paths, and held the neighbor's fallen folder to my chest like a ridiculous shield. Papers pressed my sweater, transactions, dates, sums that had never been sins. Beside me, the seed packet toppled from the hallway table, scattering mint like confetti for a wedding that had been cancelled. "Breathe," the nurse told him. "Slow, look at me." He did, and in his eyes I saw the one thing that undid me more than any rumor. Fear that had nothing to do with us, and everything. Siren thin sound lifted somewhere blocks away. The street held, listening. My husband looked at me, then really looked, and whatever verdict he'd been composing met the wrong kind of evidence. He closed his mouth on it. He stepped forward and took his own place by the nurse, holding the neighbor's wrist steady while she counting with her, as if arithmetic could bridle a gallop. The clipboard woman backed down the walk, heat having left the day. The director touched my shoulder, awkward. Comfort then followed, already rehearsing an announcement that would make facts colder and kinder than we'd been. The ambulance turned the corner, red lettering, reversed and righted in our new daylight. Paramedics took the measurements we'd fumbled, lifted him with practiced mercy, asked his name, his allergies, the date, the world. He answered enough of them to earn their speed. Before they closed the doors, he looked at me once, one clean, devastating second in which we acknowledged the same ruin, not an affair. Not a theft, but the part where a neighborhood mistook gravity for scandal. And we had helped it, each in our cowardly way. The siren took him. The street breathed again. The nurse gathered the scattered papers with a thrift that looked like love. The badge man nodded to no one and to all of us he would be writing for hours. We stood in the after silence, me and my husband. The runner underfoot, the mint seeds in the crack of the step like green promises that now felt like lies. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "I'm sorry," he said. "For which part?" I asked. Not cruel, not gentle. For the part where I needed a villain. His eyes were raw. For the part where I made you one. I wanted to say, and I made myself one, too, but the words were water and I was all splinters. The porch bulb hummed above us, merciless as noon. Somewhere a child asked an adult if the street was okay. No one answered too quickly. In the doorway between our house and everything else, I understood that catastrophe is never a single event. It's a braid of smaller, ordinary choices pulled tight until they won't undo. We had braided well. Down the block, the ambulance sound thinned, then slipped out of our hearing. The seed packet lay open at my feet. I bent, scooped what I could back into its paper mouth, and felt the rest fall through my fingers into the cracks, mint, choosing on its own where to take root, and where to be seen. The hospital called the next morning, a nurse's voice brisk, efficient, not unkind, confirmed that he had stabilized overnight. "Observation for 48 hours, she said. "He's lucky." Lucky. The word tasted strange in my mouth. My husband listened from across the table, his coffee untouched. When I hung up, he asked, "You're going to see him?" "I should," I said. "He has no one else here. You're not his family." His tone was sharp, but beneath it was something quieter, almost pleading. "Someone has to be." He flinched as if the words had landed too true. "Do you hear yourself? You sound like you've been rehearsing that line." "I sound like someone who doesn't want a man to lie. In a hospital bed alone, I said. He pushed back his chair hard enough for the legs to scrape. You think that's what this is about? Aloneness? You think I don't know what's happening in my own house? Silence spread heavy between us. Outside, the mail carrier slipped envelopes into boxes. Each thud too loud, as though the street itself was keeping score. Finally, I said, you saw the papers. He wasn't stealing. He wasn't lying. That doesn't matter, my husband snapped. What matters is that we look like liars now. To them, to each other. His voice cracked, not with anger, but with the weight of something that had been waiting years to surface. Do you know how it feels to watch your wife glow when another man enters a room? I couldn't answer, because I did know, but only from the other side. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the kitchen. You want to help him? Fine. Go, visit, bring him soup, bring him flowers, bring him whatever pieces of yourself you've been saving. But when you come back, he stopped, eyes burning. When you come back, don't pretend we're still the same. The words tore through me, leaving no safe corner. I left the house with the seed packet still on the counter, its paper edges damp from last night's spilled water. On the street, neighbors watched from behind curtains, their silhouettes as blunt as accusations. The hospital was bright and humming, machines beeping in careful rhythm. I found him in a corner room, pale but awake, eyes flicking up as I entered. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. Neither should you, I replied, nodding at the fourth line. He smiled faintly, then winced. They'll say this proves everything. The collapse, the secrets, the photo. Let them, I said. Truth never mattered to them anyway. He studied me for a long moment. Does it still matter to you? I opened my mouth but closed it again. Behind me, a monitor beeped louder, forcing honesty into the room. Finally, I whispered, I don't know anymore. His eyes softened, and for the first time I saw not just charm or strength, but the raw, unarmored weight of a man who had lost too much, and carried the rest badly. Then whatever you do, he said, don't let my ruin become your excuse. The nurse entered, checked his pulse, adjusted a line. She looked at me briefly, the way professionals do, when they know too much but can't say it. Visiting hours end in 10. I nodded, stepping back. As I left the room, I caught my reflection in the glass door, tired, drawn, carrying two lives on my shoulders, one with him, one with my husband, and knowing neither could be kept without breaking. At home, my husband was waiting in the living room, the runner rolled up, shoved against the wall. We can't stay here, he said flatly. What? This street, this house, this theater, it's poisoned. He looked at me with eyes stripped bare. Unless you want to keep living under their lights. The choice hung there, sharp and merciless: leave together, or stay divided. And in that moment, I understood that catastrophe wasn't just in the sirens, the accusations, the photographs. It was here, in this room, in the ultimatum that had no merciful answer. The night after the hospital visit, the house no longer felt like ours. My husband had rolled up the runner, shoved it by the door, as if to prove paths could be erased as quickly as they were drawn. The mint seeds sat forgotten on the counter, paper, torn, some scattered like accusations too small to sweep. We sat in the living room without speaking. The silence wasn't the old, familiar one we had lived with for years. This silence was armed. Finally, he said, do you love him? The question cracked through the air like glass under pressure. I should have denied it. I should have said no, but the truth was not that simple anymore. I don't know what I feel, I whispered. I only know that when he looks at me, I feel visible. When you look at me, I feel measured. His jaw tightened, his eyes wet in a way I had not seen in decades. So I was right. No, I said quickly. You were wrong in the way that hurts. Worse, you were right about the symptoms, but not the cause. I was already disappearing long before he knocked. The words gutted him. He turned away, gripping the back of the chair, as though furniture could keep him upright. You could have told me, he said. You could have screamed, fought, begged, anything but this silence. You gave me until someone else filled it. I wanted to argue, but the words lodged in my throat. Guilt had too many roots now. A sharp knock broke the moment. We both froze. Outside, voices, neighbors again, louder this time, less polite. My husband opened the blinds just enough. Two people from the committee, holding a printout of the photo, whispers already sharpened into accusations. They'll never stop, he said. Even if you never touched him, even if nothing happened, they'll never let us forget. I felt my chest collapse under the weight of inevitability. He turned back to me, and for the first time in years, his face was stripped of everything: anger, distance, even judgment. Only exhaustion remained. We can't fix this, he said. Not the street, not us. I shook my head, tears slipping free. What do you want me to do? He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the tremor in his breath. Leave, he said, or I will. The word hung, jagged and absolute. For a moment I thought of the hospital bed, of his weak smile, when he warned me not to use his ruin as an excuse, of mint seeds waiting for soil, of a runner rolled up like a body, of a photo circled in red ink, and I knew catastrophe is not one explosion. It is the slow burn of everything flammable you never cleared away. I walked to the door, past my husband, past the seeds, past the runner. Outside, the committee members lowered their voices, surprised to see me. I stepped into the street, not sure if I was leaving, for a night, a season, or forever. Behind me, the door closed. The sound was soft, but it was the sound of something ending. The porch bulb flickered once, then steadied, spilling its merciless daylight on an empty step. Whatever happened between us, I whispered into the night, repeating the line that had haunted me since the beginning, let it stay on this street. But the street had already chosen otherwise.